No one at Top Gun ever called Natasha Phoenix Trace the favorite. She was respected. Sure, her flight scores were solid, her instincts sharp, but in a squadron full of legends, she was always the one people expected to play it safe. She was the pilot who followed the book, who kept her cool, who got the job done. Reliable, not remarkable. That's what the others thought. She heard the whispers in the ready room, the way Hammond and Rooster traded bets on who would pull off the next wild move, the way Maverick's gaze lingered on the roster before finally calling her name for a flight. Phoenix didn't mind. She'd learned long ago that expectations were just another kind of headwind. You fly through them, or you let them push you down. The week started with a storm, literally. A cold front swept in from the Pacific, grounding half the squadron for 2 days. When the skies finally cleared, the brass announced a surprise exercise. A mock engagement against a visiting squadron of NATO aces, flown in for joint training. The rules were simple. 2 teams. One objective: defend the carrier at all costs. Phoenix was assigned to the defenders, paired with Hangman and a rookie named Viper. Rooster and Maverick would lead the attackers, along with a pair of visiting pilots who flew like they'd been born in the cockpit. The briefing was tense, the air thick with rivalry and the scent of jet fuel. Hammond grinned at Phoenix as they suited up. "You ready to play it safe, Trace?" She zipped her flight suit, meeting his gaze. "You just try to keep up." The jets launched at dawn, wings slicing through the golden haze. Phoenix felt the familiar rush as the carrier shrank behind her, the ocean stretching out in every direction. She checked her instruments, scanned the sky, and settled into the rhythm of the hunt. The first contact came fast. Rooster and Maverick, diving out of the sun, missiles locked and ready. Hammond broke left, Viper climbed, and Phoenix rolled into a defensive loop, drawing fire and forcing the attackers to split. She heard Maverick's voice in her headset, calm and steady. "Nice move, Phoenix, but you're outnumbered." Phoenix smiled, not outflung. She pulled a high G-turn, juking Rooster's missile and dropping chaff. Hangman was already bragging over the radio, calling out his own kill on one of the NATO pilots. Viper was holding his own, but the attackers pressed hard, using textbook Top Gun maneuvers to box the defenders in. Phoenix scanned her radar. She saw the trap forming, Maverick and Rooster closing from opposite sides, the NATO jets sweeping wide to cut off any escape. Ant-Man was too far out to help. Viper was about to get pinned. Phoenix's mind raced. She remembered a maneuver Maverick had drilled into them months ago, a move so risky, so counterintuitive that most pilots laughed it off as a stunt. But Phoenix had practiced it in the sim, late at night when no one was watching. She keyed her mic. "Viper on my mark, brake hard right. Hangman, cover the carrier." Hangman's voice crackled with skepticism. "What are you doing, Trace?" Phoenix didn't answer. She dropped altitude, throttled back, and let Maverick and Rooster close in. At the last second, she yanked the stick, rolled inverted, and dove straight toward the ocean, pulling a negative G split S that sent her jet screaming under the attackers' noses. The G forces pressed her into the seat, her vision tunneling as the water rushed up. At the lowest point, she leveled out, skimming the waves, her jet a blur of motion and defiance. Rooster and Maverick overshot, scrambling to reacquire. Phoenix climbed hard, looped behind the NATO jets, and tagged both with simulated missile locks before they knew what hit them. The radio erupted with disbelief. Even Maverick sounded impressed. "Nice flying, Phoenix." "Didn't see that coming?" Hammond whooped. "You just showed up the whole squadron." As the exercise ended, Phoenix circled back to the carrier, her heart pounding with adrenaline and pride. She'd taken the biggest risk of her career, and it had paid off. Back on deck, the squadron gathered around her, the skepticism replaced by awe. Even the visiting aces shook her hand, their smiles genuine. Hangman clapped her on the back. "Guess you're not just a safe bet anymore." Phoenix grinned. "I never was." That night, as the sun set over the carrier and the ocean shimmered gold, Phoenix stood alone on the flight deck, watching the horizon. She knew there would be more challenges, more doubters, more days when she'd have to prove herself all over again. But tonight, she was the pilot who'd shocked the enemy, and her own squadron with a move no one saw coming, and her legend was just beginning. Phoenix barely slept that night. The adrenaline from her maneuver still buzzed in her veins as she lay in her bunk, replaying every second, the impossible dive, the roar of the ocean, the moment she'd pulled up just in time, the memory of the squadron's cheers echoed in her mind, but so did something quieter. The look Maverick gave her on the flight deck, a mix of pride and curiosity, as if he'd just discovered something he'd been waiting to see. The next morning, the mood in the ready room was different. Phoenix was no longer just a reliable wingwoman. She was the pilot everyone wanted to fly with, the one whose name came up in every conversation. Even Hangman, usually quick with a jab, offered her a seat at his table and a rare, genuine smile. "Not bad for an underdog, Trace," he said, raising his coffee mug in salute. Rooster slid into the seat beside her. "You know, I think you just made the highlight reel for the year." Phoenix grinned, but inside she felt a new kind of pressure. It was one thing to surprise everyone once. It was another to live up to it every day. The morning briefing was interrupted by a sudden commotion. The XO strode in, face grim, and handed Maverick a printout. Maverick scanned it, then addressed the room. "We've got a real-world situation." A coalition surveillance drone went down near the edge of contested airspace. Intel suspects enemy forces are moving to recover it. We can't let that tech fall into the wrong hands. We're launching a rapid response team to secure the site and provide air cover for the extraction. He looked up, eyes sweeping the room. "Phoenix, your lead. Man, Rooster, you're with her. Viper, your backup. This isn't a drill. Rules of engagement apply. Move fast, stay sharp." Phoenix felt her pulse quicken. This was no exercise. The stakes were real. The team scrambled to the flight line. Phoenix moved with purpose, her mind already mapping out the approach. She checked her jet, exchanged a quick nod with her crew chief, and climbed into the cockpit. The familiar ritual steadied her nerves. As the jets launched, Maverick's voice came over the radio. "Phoenix, you've got this. Trust your instincts." The flight to the crash site was tense. Phoenix led the formation low over the water, using the terrain to mask their approach. Rooster kept a sharp eye on the radar, while Hangman scanned the horizon for threats. As they neared the coordinates, Rooster called out, "Got movement, multiple vehicles. Looks like a recovery team." No air cover yet, but that could change fast. Phoenix assessed the situation. The enemy was already on site, working to extract the drone. Time was running out. She keyed her mic. "Hangman, Rooster split high. Keep watch for enemy fighters. I'll go low and mark the target for the extraction team." Hangman's voice was all bravado. "Copy that, boss." Phoenix dropped altitude, skimming the treetops. She spotted the enemy trucks clustered around the wreckage, soldiers fanning out in a defensive perimeter. She armed her targeting pod and painted the site for the inbound rescue chopper. Suddenly, Rooster's voice cut in. Urgent. "Bandits inbound 2, maybe 3, coming in fast from the east." Phoenix's mind raced. They were outnumbered, and the enemy had the high ground. She had to buy time for the rescue team. She rolled into a tight turn, drawing the enemy fighters away from the crash site. Hangman followed, his jet a silver streak in the morning sun. The radio crackled with missile warnings as the enemy closed. "In, Hangman, break left, Rooster on me." Phoenix shouted. She pulled a hard climb, the G-forces pressing her into the seat. The first missile streaked past, missing by meters. She dumped chaff, rolled inverted, and dove back toward the trees, forcing the enemy to follow her into the tightest part of the valley. Hammond's voice was tense. "They're sticking to you, Phoenix." Phoenix remembered the maneuver from the day before, the one that had shocked her own squadron. She banked hard, cut her speed, and let the enemy overshoot. As they flashed past, she snapped back on air, tail locking up the lead fighter. "Fox 2, she called, launching a simulated missile. The enemy jet broke away, trailing smoke. Rooster took out the second with a clean shot, while Hammond tangled with the third, forcing it to retreat. With the skies clear, Phoenix circled back to the crash site. The rescue chopper was on the ground, the crew loading the drone as enemy ground fire erupted. Phoenix laid down suppressive fire, her jet roaring overhead, scattering the enemy soldiers. "Extraction complete," the chopper pilot called. "We're out." Phoenix formed up with her team, escorting the chopper back to friendly airspace. The adrenaline faded as the coastline came into view. Back at base, the squadron erupted in cheers. The commander met Phoenix on the tarmac, his face a rare mix of pride and relief. "You didn't just lead the mission, Lieutenant. You saved it." Hammond clapped her on the back. "Guess you're not the underdog anymore." Phoenix smiled, exhaustion and pride mingling in her chest. She had faced the enemy, trusted her instincts, and brought her team home. That night, as she stood on the flight deck, the stars bright overhead, Phoenix realized something had changed. She was no longer just a safe bet. She was the pilot everyone counted on when the mission mattered most. And as the ocean wind whipped around her, she knew her story was just getting started. The next few days on the carrier felt different. Phoenix could sense it in the way the deck crew greeted her with a little more respect, in the way the rookies watched her every move, and in the way even Hangman, never one to share the spotlight, seemed to defer to her judgment during briefings. She was still the same pilot, but something fundamental had shifted. She had become, almost overnight, the squadron's anchor. But with respect came scrutiny. The higher-ups took notice. During the next briefing, Maverick announced that Phoenix would be leading a critical joint operation with an allied squadron. The mission: escort a high-value reconnaissance plane through a newly contested zone, where enemy fighters had been spotted making aggressive passes. The stakes were higher than ever. If the recon jet was lost, the coalition would be blind for days. Phoenix studied the mission plan late into the night, mapping out contingencies, escape routes, and fallback positions. Rooster and Hangman joined her in the ready room, their usual banter subdued. "You ready for this?" Rooster asked, voice low. Phoenix nodded. "We don't have a choice. They're counting on us." Hangman leaned back, arms crossed. "Just remember, the enemy knows we're coming. They'll be waiting for a mistake." Phoenix met his gaze. "Then let's not give them one." The morning of the mission dawned gray and tense. The sea was calm, but the air was thick with anticipation. Phoenix led her team through pre-flight checks, her mind running through every scenario. The recon jet's crew, 2 seasoned aviators, looked to her for reassurance. "We'll keep you safe," Phoenix promised. The jets launched in tight formation. The recon plane sandwiched between Phoenix's team and a pair of allied fighters. The flight was uneventful at first, the radio quiet except for routine check-ins. But as they crossed into the contested zone, Rooster's voice broke the silence. "Contacts, 3 bandits, high and fast, coming in hot." Phoenix's heart pounded. She keyed her mic. "Hangman, Rooster, take the flanks. Allied flight, cover the rear. Recon, stay tight." The enemy fighters closed in, their tactics aggressive and unpredictable. Phoenix anticipated their moves, calling out evasive maneuvers, keeping the formation tight. The first missile warning blared in her headset, and she rolled her jet, dropping chaff and flares. Hammond's voice was sharp. "They're trying to split us up." Phoenix saw the trap forming. The enemy leader was feinting left, drawing Rooster away, while the other two dove for the recon jet. Phoenix made a split-second decision. "Hammond with me. Rooster, stay on the lead bandit." She and Hammond rolled into a steep dive, cutting off the attackers just as they lined up on the recon plane. Phoenix fired a warning burst, forcing one enemy to break off. Hammond tagged the other with a simulated missile lock, but the enemy leader was very good. He looped behind Rooster, forcing him into a defensive spiral. Phoenix pulled hard, G-forces pressing her into the seat, and cut across the leader's path, drawing his fire. The dogfight was a blur, jets twisting, missiles streaking, the ocean spinning below. Phoenix trusted her instincts, her training, and her team. She baited the enemy into a tight turn, then rolled inverted and dropped behind him, locking him up. "Fox 2, she called. Launching a simulated missile dot, the enemy leader broke away, defeated. The sky was clear. The recon jet's pilot came on the radio, voice shaking with relief. "Thanks, Phoenix. We owe you one." Phoenix smiled, adrenaline fading. "Just doing my job." They escorted the recon plane back to friendly airspace. The debrief was intense, every move analyzed, every decision questioned. The brass wanted to know why Phoenix had split the formation, why she'd risked the head-on pass. She answered calmly, explaining her reasoning, her trust in her team, her read of the enemy's tactics. Maverick listened, then nodded. "You made the right call. That's what leadership looks like." After the briefing, Hangman caught up with her in the corridor. "You took a hell of a risk out there." Phoenix shrugged. "Sometimes you have to," Hangman grinned. "Guess you're not the underdog anymore." That night, Phoenix stood alone on the flight deck, watching the stars shimmer above the endless sea. She thought about the risks she'd taken, the trust she'd earned, the lives she'd protected. She knew there would be more challenges, more doubts, more days when she'd have to prove herself all over again. But she also knew that she was ready. Her daring maneuver had shocked the enemy. Her leadership had saved the mission. And her legend was still growing, one flight at a time. The days after the recon escort were a blur of drills, debriefs, and the constant churn of carrier life. Phoenix found herself at the center of it. All pilots came to her for advice. The commander asked her to weigh in on tactics, and even the deck crew started calling her boss with a wink. She was proud, but she felt the weight of every decision more than ever. Leadership, she realized, wasn't just about flying, it was about being there for your team, even when the adrenaline faded and the doubts crept in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maverick found her alone on the flight deck, watching the jets return from a late sortie. He leaned on the railing beside her, his gaze distant. "You did good out there," he said quietly. Phoenix nodded. "Thanks. It's a lot sometimes." He smiled, the lines around his eyes softening. "It never gets easier. But you learn to trust yourself and your team. That's what keeps you alive." She looked at him, searching for any sign of doubt. "How do you know when to take the risk? When to trust your gut?" Maverick's answer was simple. "You never really know. You just fly the best you can and own the outcome." That night, Phoenix lay awake, thinking about his words. She wondered if she'd have the nerve when it really counted, not just in a training exercise or a controlled engagement, but in the kind of crisis that leaves no room for error. The answer came sooner than she expected. The next morning, the carrier was rocked by a sudden emergency. A supply ship in their convoy had struck a mine and was taking on water fast. Worse, enemy fast attack boats were spotted on radar, closing in to finish the job. If the ship sank, The fleet would lose critical fuel and supplies, maybe even be forced to abandon their position. The commander called an emergency briefing. "We need air cover for the rescue teams and to drive off those boats. Phoenix, your lead. Take whoever you need." Phoenix didn't hesitate. "Rooster, Hangman, Viper, you're with me. We'll fly low and fast. Keep the boats away from the rescue zone." The team scrambled to their jets, the mood tense but focused. As they launched, Phoenix felt the familiar rush of takeoff, the world narrowing to the cockpit, the mission, the trust in her wingwoman. They reached the convoy just as the enemy boats came into view, sleek, fast, bristling with weapons. The rescue choppers were already on station, winching sailors from the stricken ship. Phoenix keyed her mic. "Rooster, Hangman split wide. Keep the boats boxed in. Viper, cover the choppers." The enemy opened fire, tracers streaking across the waves. Phoenix rolled into a low pass, her jet's shadow racing over the water. She fired a warning burst, sending one boat veering off course. Hangman's voice crackled in her headset. "They're not backing down." Phoenix saw the lead. Boat lining up on a rescue chopper. She had seconds to act. She banked hard, dove low, and fired a missile that detonated just off the bow, showering the boat with spray and debris. The enemy broke formation, retreating under the sudden onslaught. Rooster called out, "Choppers are clear." All survivors accounted for, but the danger wasn't over. A second wave of boats appeared on radar, faster and more heavily armed. Phoenix's team was low on ammo, and the choppers were still vulnerable. She made a snap decision. "Hammond, Rooster, form up on me. We're gonna bluff them." She led her team in a tight, aggressive formation, diving straight at the enemy. Boats with afterburners blazing. The sudden show of force worked. The boats scattered, unwilling to face a full squadron head dash on dot as the last rescue chopper lifted off. Phoenix circled the sinking ship, making sure every sailor was clear. Only then did she lead her team back to the carrier, the adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. On deck, the crew erupted in cheers. The rescued sailors lined up to thank the pilots, their gratitude raw and real. The commander shook Phoenix's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved the fleet, Lieutenant. We couldn't have done it without you." That night, Phoenix found herself on the flight deck again, the stars bright above the dark sea. Rooster joined her, quiet and thoughtful. "You made the right call," he said. "You always do." Phoenix smiled, the weight of the day lifting just a little. "Not always, but I try." He nudged her shoulder. "That's what makes you the best." As the carrier sailed on into the night, Phoenix realized that being a leader wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, trusting your team, and flying through the fear, no matter how many times the world tried to count you out. She was the underdog who had shocked the enemy, the leader who had saved her fleet, and the pilot her squadron would follow anywhere. And as the ocean stretched out before her, Phoenix knew she was ready for whatever came next. The days after the convoy rescue felt like a new chapter for Phoenix and her squadron. Word of her leadership and the daring bluff spread through the fleet. Pilots from other carriers nodded in respect when they passed her in the mess. The deck. Crew painted a tiny Phoenix emblem on her jet's nose, and even the commander started calling her by her cow sign with a smile. But peace never lasted long at sea. The enemy, stung by their failed attack, began massing air power for a decisive strike. Recon flights reported a buildup of fighters and bombers on the far side of the contested zone. The carrier group braced for an assault that could decide the fate of the entire operation. Phoenix was called into the war room. The commander's face was grave. "We expect a major strike at dawn. You'll lead the intercept. If they break through, we lose air cover for the fleet." "This is it, Lieutenant. Everything we've worked for comes down to this." She nodded, feeling the familiar mix of fear and resolve. "We'll hold the line, sir." That night, Phoenix gathered her. Team Rooster, Hangman, Viper, and a handful of rookies who looked to her with wide, anxious eyes. She spoke quietly, her voice carrying in the ready room. "We're outnumbered, but we're not outmatched. We fly as one. We trust each other. And no matter what happens, we don't leave anyone behind." Rooster grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it, boss." Hangman smirked. "Let's show them what underdogs can do." As the first light crept over the horizon, the squadron launched into a sky streaked with gold and crimson. The enemy was already inbound a wall of fighters and bombers, their formation tight and disciplined. Phoenix led her team high and fast, scanning for weaknesses. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The battle erupted in a storm of missiles and cannon fire. Phoenix's voice was calm and clear over the radio, calling out threats, directing, a wingman weaving through the chaos. Rooster took out a bomber with a textbook shot. Hangman baited a pair of enemy fighters into a trap, and Viper covered the rookies, keeping them steady. But the enemy pressed harder. More fighters poured in, trying to break the line. Phoenix saw a gap opening near the center, a group of bombers. Slipping through, headed straight for the fleet. She made a split-second decision. "On me!" she called, diving straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Her jet screamed through the gauntlet, missiles streaking past, G-forces crushing her into the seat. She locked onto the lead bomber, fired, and watched it break apart in a fireball. The others scattered, thrown into confusion. Enemy fighters closed in, trying to cut her off. Phoenix rolled inverted, dove under their guns, and pulled a maneuver so tight her vision blurred. Rooster and Hangman fought at her side, the squadron moving as one. Every lesson, every risk, every ounce of trust coming together in a single perfect moment. The enemy faltered. Their formation broke. The fleet was safe. As the last enemy jet turned for home, the radio erupted with cheers. Phoenix could hear the relief and pride in every voice. They landed to a hero's welcome. The commander met her on the flight deck, his salute sharp and proud. "You did it, Phoenix. You saved us all." She smiled, exhaustion and joy mingling in her chest. "We did it, sir. All of us." That night, as the carrier sailed into calm seas, Phoenix stood alone at the bow, the wind in her hair, the stars blazing overhead. Rooster joined her, leaning on the rail. "You know," he said, "no one's ever going to call you an underdog again." Phoenix laughed, the sound ringing out over the water. "Let them try." He nudged her, a grin on his face. "You shocked the enemy, and you shocked us too." She looked at him, at the dark horizon, at the future stretching out before her. "I just did what I had to do, for the team, for the mission." Rooster nodded. "That's what makes you a legend." Phoenix watched the sunrise, her heart full. She knew there would be more battles, more doubts, more days when she'd have to prove herself all over again. But she also knew she was ready. She was the underdog who had become a leader, the pilot who flew through fear, who trusted her team, who dared to try the impossible. And as the carrier sailed on, Phoenix knew her story was only beginning. If you've ever been underestimated, doubted, or told you weren't enough, remember, Phoenix. Sometimes the world needs an underdog to rise, to risk, and to lead. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more true tales of courage, teamwork, and adventure, subscribe and join us for the next flight, because the next legend could be you. The days after the battle brought a strange calm to the carrier group. The enemy had been pushed back, the fleet was safe, and for the first time in weeks, the crew could breathe. Phoenix was hailed as a hero. Her name echoed in the mess, her face featured in the fleet's daily bulletin. And the little Phoenix emblem on her jet became a symbol for the whole squadron. But for Phoenix, the quiet was almost harder than the chaos. She found herself wandering the flight deck at odd hours, replaying the battle in her mind, wondering if she'd made the right calls, if she'd pushed too hard or not hard enough. The weight of leadership was different, now less about proving herself, more about living up to the legend she'd suddenly become. One afternoon, as she walked the hangar, she found Rooster tinkering with his jet, grease on his hands and a thoughtful look on his face. "You ever feel like it's all a little too much?" she asked, sitting beside him. Rooster wiped his hands and shrugged. "Sometimes, but you just keep flying. That's all any of us can do." She nodded, grateful for his steadiness. "It's weird. I always thought once I proved myself, it would get easier. But now it's like everyone's watching, waiting for the next move." Rooster grinned. "That's because you set the bar, Phoenix, and you keep raising it." The next day brought new orders. The fleet would be moving into a new sector, closer to contested waters. Intelligence warned of possible enemy subs and stealth aircraft in the area. The commander called Phoenix into his office. "I want you to train a new flight. Rookies, mostly good. Instincts, but green. They need to learn from the best." Phoenix accepted the assignment, her nerves tingling with a mix of pride and apprehension. She remembered her own first days on the carrier, the pressure, the fear of messing up. Now, she was the one the next generation would look to for guidance. Training the rookies was harder than she expected. Some were cocky, eager to impress. Others were quiet, afraid to make mistakes. Phoenix pushed them hard, but she also listened, sharing her own failures, her doubts, the time she'd almost given up. She watched as they slowly gelled into a team, learning to trust each other, to communicate without words. One night after a long day of drills, Phoenix sat with the rookies on the flight deck. The stars bright overhead. "You don't have to be the loudest or the boldest," she told them. "You just have to show up. Every time, even when you're scared. Especially then." A rookie named Sparks looked at her, eyes wide. "Were you ever scared?" Phoenix smiled. "Every single flight. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's flying through it." As the fleet moved into the new sector, the tension returned. The enemy was too quiet. Patrols reported strange radar echoes, fleeting glimpses of shadows on the horizon. The commander ordered round-the-clock caps, and Phoenix found herself back in the cockpit, leading her team through endless sweeps. Then, one night, the alarm sounded. An unidentified contact had slipped past the outer picket, moving fast and low toward the carrier. Phoenix launched with Rooster, Angman, and 2 rookies, adrenaline spiking as they raced into the dark. The contact turned out to be a stealth drone, bristling with sensors and weapons. It darted through their formation, jamming comms and firing decoys. Phoenix called out orders, her voice calm but urgent. "Heyman, cut left. Rooster on me. Rookies, hold position." The drone was fast, unpredictable. It looped behind one rookie, locking on with a simulated missile. Phoenix dove between them, breaking the lock, then rolled inverted and came up on the drone's tail. She fired a warning burst, forcing the drone to break off. Rooster and Handman boxed it in, while the rookies held their nerve, following every command. Finally, Phoenix lined up the shot and took it. The drone systems went dark, and the threat was over. Back on deck, the rookies crowded around her, eyes shining with relief and admiration. "You saved me out there," Sparks said. Voice shaking, Phoenix put a hand on his shoulder. "No, you saved yourself. You listened. You trusted the team." The commander debriefed the squadron, praising their discipline and teamwork. "This is what makes us strong," he said. "Not just skill, but trust. That's what Phoenix taught you." That night, Phoenix stood alone at the edge of the flight deck, the wind cool on her face. She thought about everything she'd learned, the risks, the victories, the mistakes. She realized that being a legend wasn't about never failing. It was about lifting others up, about flying through the fear, about showing the next pilot that they could be more than anyone expected. She watched the rookies laugh and joke, saw Rooster and Hanman trading stories, felt the pulse of the carrier beneath her feet. She knew there would be more battles, more nights when the world seemed too big, the odds too long. But she also knew she was ready. She was the underdog who had become a leader, the pilot who shocked the enemy and inspired a new generation to a new generation to Veneris rise. And as the carrier sailed on into the unknown, Phoenix smiled, knowing her legend would fly on in every pilot she'd ever led. The new sector was nothing like the last. The waters were colder, the skies grayer, and every patrol felt like threading a needle through a storm. Phoenix had grown into her role as both leader and mentor, but the pressure never let up. Each day brought new challenges. A rookie freezing up in a training exercise, a near miss with a refueling tanker, rumors of enemy stealth fighters prowling just beyond radar range. The fleet's nerves were fraying. Even Rooster and Hangman, usually the heart of squadron banner, were quieter, more focused. The rookies watched Phoenix constantly, searching her face for signs of fear or doubt. One night, as she walked flight deck, Phoenix found Maverick waiting for her by the bow. He leaned on the cold metal rail, staring into the darkness. "You've built something here," he said, voice low. "They trust you. They'd follow you through hell." Phoenix smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I just hope I'm leading them the right way." Maverick looked at her, his gaze steady. "You are. But every leader faces a moment when everything is on the line. Yours is coming. You'll know it when it hits." His words echoed in her mind as she lay in her bunk, unable to sleep. She wondered what that moment would look like, if she'd recognize it, if she'd be ready. The answer came with the dawn. The carrier's radar picked up a massive enemy formation moving fast from the North fighters. Bombers, and, most worrying of all, a new type of electronic warfare jet that could blind the fleet's defenses. If they broke through, the carrier would be a sitting duck. The commander's voice was grim in the war room. "Phoenix, your lead. We need to stop that EW jet or we're finished. Take whoever you trust most." Phoenix didn't hesitate. "Rooster, Hangman, Sparks, and Viper with me. The rest covered the fleet." The team launched into a sky streaked with the first light of morning. The enemy formation was already visible, a black wave on the horizon. Phoenix's heart pounded, but her voice was steady as she called out orders. "Rooster, Hangman, stay high. Draw the fighters. Sparks, Viper on me. We're going after the EW jet." The dogfight erupted instantly. Rooster and Hangman tangled with enemy fighters, missiles shrieking, flares blooming. Phoenix dove low, weaving through chaos, her eyes locked on the strange angular silhouette of the U-jet. She radioed the rookies. "Stay tight. Don't break formation, no matter what." The EW jet unleashed a burst of jamming. Her radar went fuzzy. Comms crackled with static. The enemy fighters closed in, sensing weakness. Phoenix made a split-second decision. "Sparks, break left and climb. Viper, follow me." She rolled inverted, dove under the U-jet's wing, and came up behind it, flying blind, trusting her instincts and the training she'd drilled into her team. The enemy pilot tried to shake her, but Phoenix anticipated every move, staying glued to his tail. Viper's voice was tense. "I've got your 6, boss." Phoenix fired a missile simulated, but in the moment, it felt real. The EW jet systems failed, and it peeled away, mission killed. But the fight wasn't over. Sparks was in trouble, an enemy fighter locked on his tail. Phoenix shot across the sky, cutting off the attacker with a burst of cannon fire. Sparks broke free, voice shaking with relief. "Thanks, Phoenix. I thought I was done." She smiled. "Not on my watch." With the EW jet gone and the enemy formation thrown into confusion, Rooster and Hangman pressed the advantage. The fleet's defenses came back online, and the enemy retreated. Back on deck, the squadron erupted in cheers. The commander met Phoenix as she climbed down from her jet, his expression a mix of pride and awe. "You saved us all. Again." Phoenix looked at her team: Rooster, Hangman, Sparks, Viper. The rookies she'd trained, the friends she'd fought beside. She realized that Maverick was right. Every leader faces a moment that defines them. Hers had come, and she'd met it head-on. That night, as the carrier sailed on into the unknown, Phoenix stood on the flight deck, the wind in her hair, the stars blazing overhead. She wasn't just the underdog anymore. She was the leader her squadron needed, the one who'd flown through fear, who'd trusted her team, who'd dared to face the impossible. And as the horizon opened before her, Phoenix knew her legend would live on in every pilot who followed her into the sky. The carrier deck was alive with energy, the kind that only comes after a hard-fought victory. Pilots, crew, and officers moved with purpose, the tension of battle replaced by the quiet pride of survival. Phoenix stood at the center of it all, her flight suit still bearing the marks of the last engagement, her eyes reflecting the dawn light. She watched as Rooster and Hammond debriefed with the commander, their faces animated with relief and camaraderie. Sparks and Viper, once rookies trembling with uncertainty, now stood tall, their confidence forged in the crucible of combat. The commander approached, his expression solemn but warm. "Lieutenant Trace, you've come a long way from the underdog to the leader we all rely on. Your courage, your instincts, your heart, they saved this fleet." Phoenix nodded, humbled. "I couldn't have done it without the team." He smiled. "That's the mark of a true leader." Later, as the sun dipped low over the endless ocean, Phoenix found herself alone on the flight deck. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the salty tang of the sea. She thought about the journey, the doubts, the risks, the moments she'd almost turned back. She thought about the midnight flight that started it all, the move that shocked her squadron, the battles that tested her limits. She thought about every pilot who'd ever been counted out, overlooked, or underestimated. And she knew her story was bigger than herself thought it was about. Resilience thought about trust, thought about flying through fear. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Rooster stepped beside her, eyes on the horizon. "You ready for what's next?" he asked. Phoenix smiled, the weight lifting from her shoulders. "Always." Together, they watched the sky darken, stars emerging one by one. The future was uncertain, the challenges endless, but Phoenix was ready, because legends aren't born. They're made, one daring flight at a time. If you've ever felt like the underdog, remember Phoenix. Sometimes, the greatest shock is the one that comes from the last person you expect. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more true tales of courage, leadership, and adventure, subscribe and join. You ask for the next flight, because the next legend could be you.